Maybe you thought the psychopaths are just the ones who appear in the movies and kill people, as I did. The truth is that this is not the case. According to studies, the figures of the presence of this pathology in society are quite alarming. Many psychologists and psychiatrists are shocked by the large number of victims at the hands of these people. And there is not enough awareness campaigns about this. You may ask, are there men and women with this narcissistic psychopathic personality disorder? The answer is yes. However, specialists point out that most of them are men, and I will focus on them for now. Narcissistic psychopaths have two totally opposite faces. One is the charismatic one, the funny, kind, charming, very sociable, a real charmer. He seems to be kind and splendid, to the point that the victim feels lucky to have gotten such a man. Everyone would think that he would never do anything that goes against these first characteristics, not even you. But the reality is that he is a chameleon who hides his other faces at times, the face of the darkest and most malicious, most cruel and ruthless traits. In his other face, he is controlling, possessive, a torturer, very manipulative, violent, calculative, and even criminal. Dr. Iñaki points out that our current model of society is a breeding ground for psychopaths to proliferate because society covers them up and often supports them. Dr. Iñaki also points out that they live in a parasitic way, socially and economically. They could even invade your home in a very subtle way, as it happened to me. In 2014, Sharhan Rodriguez ultimately captured a new prey, an immigrant. As you know, I moved to Miami with the mission to go after my dreams, grow my career, and make money to help my family in Venezuela. Just like I wanted to get my dad and my brother out of there. It all started through Instagram. He contacted me to offer me a job dancing in a club in Miami. I thought he was someone serious, professional. He danced for Ricky Martin. On his Instagrams, there were mostly pictures of his work with Ricky. I agreed to show my talents. And the same day he met me, he started his strategy. He invited me to dinner. He started asking me all the details of my immigration process and my goals in Miami. He learned about my family and my need to get them out of Venezuela. He told me he wanted to help me. He was quite moved by the situation in my country and rarely very concerned about wanting to help my family get out of there. From that moment on, he knew that this was my desire and my vulnerability. At first, he came across as a fun, outgoing, friendly guy with a list of behaviors I couldn't quite figure it out. His positive masks covered up the reality of many other signs. He quickly started flirting with me and wanted to impress me by all means. He took me to places, clubs, introduced me to people. In short, an overflow of love and passion which I found strange and very hasty. This is where I clearly didn't see the first red flags. What person you just met shows up like this, with an exaggerated concern to do something urgent to help your family the same day they met you? the excessive attentions definitely camouflage the true intentions. At that time, I found him empathetic, positive, attentive, and one may even say helpful. Specialists call this stage love bombing. And the mission is only one: to charm the prey. By this time, he was supposedly single, and his actions somehow or other affirmed it. He would take me to places and let himself be seen publicly with me. He made me feel special. That's when I fell for it. Within days, he was already taking selfies of us kissing on the beach. That surprised me. It felt like he wanted to leave an evidence that he was with me. It didn't feel real. But again, I fell for it. At that time, he mentioned to me that his ex-girlfriend, whom he called the crazy one, would not leave him alone. It all seemed very strange to me because his supposed ex worked as a waitress in the same club where I went to dance. In fact, she was helping him with his company because she was the one who gave me the wardrobe that night. He was looking to touch me and seduce me while she was there. It was all very confusing and uncomfortable at the same time. I was embarrassed. I didn't know how to react. I also didn't know that this was a type of sexual harassment and that I was unknowingly being part of a torture strategy. He was doing it so blatantly, it was impossible for me that they were still together, and unfortunately, I fell for it again. Everything went extremely fast. In a matter of days, he was already telling me that he had never met anyone like me. He said that what he saw in me was very magical and that he had never experienced it with anyone. That it was a very special chemistry, in short, a lot of words with only one mission: to wrap me up. The truth is, I let a lot of red flags go by. I silenced my intuition. I believed him. How can you believe something like that from someone you have just met? Well, these kind of people have a wide faculty to make their prey feel very special in order to gain their trust. And even more so in specific moments, like in the early stages, because they are not like that all the time. You see, psychologists affirm that in this first stage, the narcissistic psychopath uses all kinds of tricks to cajole, charm, manipulate, and conquer. But above all, his mission is to know the deepest vulnerabilities of his prey. For example, struggles in their past, some insecurities, some previous problems, some fear, and that is where he begins to show himself to be moved and apparently empathetic. This makes his role as a prince very evident to society and to his victims at first. How did I see this tactic in my story? Every question about my family, every question about my immigration status, my goal in Miami, the details of my visa processing, the attentions, absolutely everything had a purpose. Even the excess of empathy and extreme concern for supposedly helping me get my family out of Venezuela. Experts on the subject also claim that all their declarations of love are a total bullshit. They are not directed at you, since they don't care about you. They are aimed at his plan of manipulation and sweetening in order to create and maintain the traumatic and twisted circle in which they begin to lock their victims. And that is how it gradually happened to me. After a few days, his tactics became more evident. Those selfie photos he had taken on the beach shortly after meeting me were discovered by his supposed ex. She wrote me directly to tell me that they were in Mexico together. At that time, I thought it was strange because it was a very different story than the one he had mentioned to me. I was very confused, and he kept insisting that she was a crazy woman who wouldn't leave him alone and that she was pressuring him to marry her. The strange thing is that in his social media he showed another reality, the reality that he did seem to be committed to her. I decided to stop talking to him because everything was very nebulous. Although he has a great convincing power and knows how to lie very well. It wasn't until much later, in the middle of a legal case, that I came to understand that he's a pathological liar. He believes his own lies so much that he could even fool a polygraph. Yeah, but lies have short legs. Months later, once settled in the United States, I began to see him in different places, and so his mission to entrap me began again. One night, I was having lunch with a friend at a restaurant, and he happened to be there too. By the time we weren't speaking, he was on his way out, but he didn't leave. He stood outside the place alone. I could see him through a glass wall that separated us. He wouldn't take his eyes off me. He was very intimidating. He waited patiently outside the place, and when he saw that my friend went to the bathroom and I was alone, he entered the restaurant and placed a bill on the table and insisted on seeing me later and left. However, it was not just any bill. It was a bill from Venezuela, my vulnerability, a bill he had been holding since we met, a bill that I had given him. The intention behind all was that I would agree to see him later. Sometimes women think in front of those type of details, wow, he kept it all this time. Does he really care about me? From there began the bombardment of messages. The reality behind these actions is that they know very well what they do, how they do it, and when to use it. Psychologists state that they keep any kind of detail, image, or phrase that they know they could use to break the prey. And little by little I fell because he had officially broken up with her, his ex, the so-called crazy one. More than being done with her, he now had a new prey who was officially settled in Miami. Me. She, his ex, is named Stephanie Pagan. That girl he claimed was the crazy one hated me at first. He always made her believe that I needed him to fix my immigrant status, which was never the case. The emotional dependency and triangulations he applied to her using me to make her suffer were very cruel. You may ask, what is a triangulation? A triangulation is an indirect manipulation tactic involving more than two people. The manipulator tortures with the usually unconscious help of a third person. That third person is also deceived. The idea is to provoke jealousy in his prey, causing strong insecurities that end up triggering a terrible low self-esteem and a strong alteration of the nervous system in the victim. And do you want to know something that I never imagined would happen? On December 6, 2015, she, his ex, upon seeing that I decided to denounce on social media having been abused by him, took the courage and also publicly confessed to having suffered physical, psychological, and emotional violence. She also denounced having received threats. Yes, the same one who hated me joined the cause, that of publicly spitting out our abuse. We opened our eyes and shared our suffering. I will go deeper into this later. And if she was the one he sucked the energy out of, tortured, mistreated, and cheated on before, what do you think was going to happen to me? It was my turn. And by then, I didn't have even the slightest knowledge that I have today. Dr. Romani, a clinical psychologist specializing in narcissistic and psychopathic abuse, states that narcissistic psychopaths don't leave one victim without being sure they already have another. They call this supply by supply switching. This means that until they secure the ground with a new prey, they will not leave the other one. And this is because they can't be alone. They can't live alone with all the darkness inside them. They need victims to feed their emotional darkness and accomplish their goals. Triangulating, lying, seducing, cheating, flirting. They are egomaniacs, so they can't live without someone's attention. For them, the suffering they can cause to their victims, it's insatiable. They can always torture, manipulate, extort, humiliate, and make them fall in love more and more. And then they use their excess to torture the current partner, and vice versa. This is called emotional torture and is a power play. I had just recently moved to Miami. I was alone, going through a very hard family loss for me, the death of my dad. I was very vulnerable in another country and alone, so I was the perfect target. And he knew perfectly how important was my dad for me. After a while, he used my father's death as a means of manipulation to enter my life. And that was how I sadly opened the doors of my home to him. His excuse was, "I don't want you to be alone. I know this is a very difficult time for you. I want to be your company. Let me accompany you in your grief." And I believed him. I never thought he would make everything more painful. I never thought cruelty was knocking on the door of my home. Then, in an imperceptible way, he began to invade my space, to stay constantly in my apartment, to leave clothes. My time became for him, for his friends, for his things, for his family, for constant parties in which he ended up with very aggressive and impertinent drunkenness. In short, when I asked for space and time for me, according to him, I became the selfish one, the bad guy in the movie who only thought about me. I didn't realize his manipulations, and again, I fell. I forgot what it was like to have my own space. I forgot what it was like to make time for me. And little by little, I forgot about me. How many times do we give up being our priority to satisfy the desires of others, and we get lost? All this happened without even being boyfriend and girlfriend because I wasn't sure I would give him the chance. For 3 months, he kept insisting. I was hesitant because everything had been very nebulous at the beginning. At that time, my intuition was talking to me, but I didn't listen to it. I was having a hard time setting boundaries because he constantly approached me with the emotion of mentioning my dad and his departure. I never managed to imagine that these were manipulation tactics, because who is capable of using the memory of a loved one to manipulate them? I didn't know many people in Miami, and he usually had a lot of free time since for some mysterious reason he was no longer dancing with Ricky Martin. So his mission was to convince me to be his new official partner, his new supply, his new toy. The relationship began under pressure and manipulation. Foolishly, I agreed, and so began a dark game. Experts assure that narcissistic psychopaths have a script of behaviors. They are collectors of phrases, places, and songs to dedicate, and they research very well the likes, hobbies, favorite books, and desires of their targets. They will create the illusion of being your soulmate. Sometimes they even study and imitate movie characters and are very histrionic, good actors. That is why they lie so well. Little by little, you discover their true mask through their infidelities and gaslighting. And maybe you're wondering, what is gaslighting? Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse. It's the act of manipulating a person by forcing them to question their own thoughts, their memories, and the events occurring around them. A victim of gaslighting may be pushed so far that they question their own sanity. That is, they deny events and betrayals that you discovered to them, or they make you believe that you are completely insane. They execute their infidelities very blatantly. They disappear for hours at a time when they are on their treacherous wanderings. The fact that the victim wonders, where is he? Why did he disappear? Why doesn't he answer? That gives them morbidity. That gives them adrenaline. The mere idea that they may get caught, they like it deep down. They like you to find out about their infidelities so that your self-esteem goes to the ground and apply more emotional torture. That is why they take photos and videos with the women or men they triangulate with and leave them very accessible. They will still do whatever it takes to make you believe they won't do it again. And their victim's self-worth and trust is so gradually destroyed, so much so that it gets to a point where they blame their victims for their own infidelities, punish them, and the victims gradually give up and sadly embrace that guilt. All these types of tortures, all of them, I live them. If you have gone through unfair, toxic, abusive, and painful circumstances, I would like to help you recognize, validate, and release those experiences and emotions. Let's take steps full of self-love, courage, and vulnerability, because you deserve it. Go to the link in the description, maggalife.com/liberation, and get your masterclass and workbook. It's free. With love, Magdiel.